Heading into this NHL season in St. Louis, optimism was super high because they were perennial playoff contender, but midway through the season they found themselves in last place. But fast forward to May, and they are in the Western Conference Final. That historic turnaround is the subject of our big read this week, and the author is Gare Joyce. And Gare, thank you for joining us and for writing the piece. And first off, can you give us a bite size of this big read?
We live in curious times, right? Where we live in a time when an expansion team can make a Stanley Cup final one year. So should we be surprised that a team is in last place in mid-season and goes off on a run to the conference final? Maybe we shouldn't be, but I think the most surprising thing was that with this team in last place in January, the GM did not make a move.
What I love about what you did in this piece is you took quotes from the market, bring you back into that place. You understand the feeling that they had at the time, and the lose for Jack Hughes feeling was there. The only real change they made was with the coach. How much was that a deciding factor in where they are right now?
It's a curious one. I would love to put it down to a change of coach, and you always talk about good cop, bad cop. But this is sort of like they replaced a good cop with another good cop, right? It doesn't. I don't know that. I'm sure that it played a role. I know that Craig Berube, who came in for Mike Yeo, Berube wanted the team to play more of a possession game rather than dump and chase. But in the team, there was an uptick. What was curious was this team should have been better than its record, given shot differential and puck possession and all of those metrics. St. Louis was a last place team in January with good bones.
Those results started to change when the goalie changed. And people have made their story about Jordan Binnington in his rookie year.
Which is a great story.
It is a great story, but you waited 1,300 plus words until you mentioned his name. There's a difference between causation and correlation.
Yeah.
Were they playing better and he was in the net, or did he allow them to play better?
I think he happened on the scene at a great time, right? I think he came in at basically the nadir of the season, and he gave them I think his first 15 games were like out of sight. He returned to earth a bit later in the season. Still, in 30 odd games, he's a Rookie of the Year finalist. I think that he was a small part of the turnaround. And even Doug Armstrong says that you could probably overwrite the idea that Binnington was a savior, when really there was a lot more to it than that.
I love the fact that in this story there are so many subplots, so many other interesting stories. One of them is the local boy turned folk hero in Pat Maroon. What, for people who don't know his story, do you find fascinating about his narrative?
Watching Game 7 against Dallas and seeing his son in the crowd. I mean, if you don't tingle with that, see a doctor, right? You are living without a heart. What was amazing about that was that you have this game to advance to the conference final, and it's a St. Louis native beating a St. Louis native in Ben Bishop. It was a pretty amazing moment seeing the son and father in the dressing room, and this tight chemistry in the room, and like everyone's so supportive of Maroon.
Nice, boys. This is the fastest you skated all night after the goal there. Getting away from us. I don't know what to do.
One of the constant voices throughout the story is Doug Armstrong, obviously.
Yes.
And what I learned from you about writing a great story is conflict resolution is at the heart of it. He has a conflict and he doesn't really resolve it. Yet he is in talks for being the GM of the year. Can you give someone credit for not doing really anything at all?
I think so. I mean, it takes guts to play a pat hand. You know, he saw that the team was playing better than its record. There was things that he liked about his team, which is funny because the year before, St. Louis was actually on the playoff grid when they traded Paul Stastny, who was an unrestricted free agent. And Doug told me that, you know what, we were in the chase for a playoff spot, but we weren't playing well. He didn't like his team. He liked his team more this year, even when they were way, way out of the race. 9 out of 10 executives would have buckled under pressure to make a move. But he had bought into this team and he was going to stand by it.
Another thing you've told me is a writer goes into a story curious, looking to learn something. What did you learn in writing the story that you didn't know?
I mean, and I've watched him for a lot of years, going way back, but I didn't really fully appreciate how meaningful Ryan O'Reilly is to their success to this point.
Word count can be an editor's best friend and a writer's worst nightmare. Was there an anecdote or a nugget that you really liked that you didn't get into the story?
Well, now, okay, I've known Doug for more than 20 years, and I don't know that it would be a fit for this story. But what I would say, I'll tell you the story of how I first met Doug Armstrong. So the one night I was covering World Juniors in Finland. It was the night before the final day of the tournament, and this is 1998. And so I had gone out for a couple of cocktails with a couple of scouts. Doug at the time was with the Dallas Stars. So at the end of the night, Doug Risebrough, who these days is with the Rangers but was GM in Calgary and has been in hockey forever and owner of Stanley Cup rings, says, let's go back to my room and we'll have a drink there. Invites all these other hockey scouts, executives, lower executives. At that session, in Doug Riseborough's room, there was Craig Button, who went on to become GM in Calgary. There's Tim Murray, who went on to become GM in Buffalo and longtime scout. Doug Armstrong. After an hour or two, we have emptied Doug Riseborough's bar fridge, right? And you can't even imagine the expense that would be attached to that. Like when you're talking about like $30 splits of champagne. So Doug said, well, let's restock this. And so everyone left, went back to their rooms and emptied their bar fridges, right? I put all of the bottles and like chocolate bars and cigars in pillowcases. Right, and so I put mine in a pillow, and everyone just dumped it on the bed, and like we yacked until dawn. I remember we went down straight to breakfast, smoking cigars, right, and drinking screwdrivers. But now I have an immense headache, right, because I have to check out of the hotel, right, and I have this charge for the entire contents of my bar fridge, right, and so I went to check out, and the clerk said, thank you very much for your business, Mr. Joyce. Would you like your receipt in English or Finnish? And I said, Finnish, please. And so that somehow escaped the notice of a great metropolitan paper, and it's sailed through. But that was when I met Doug, and we'll always have Helsinki.
Well, I don't think it will escape the notice of our viewers, and that type of access is why Behind the Big Read is so great. The piece is so great. It literally was a tale of two seasons. We'll see if they have a storybook ending to this season, but it's a really great story, so credit to you. You can read A Tale of Two Seasons by Gare Joyce on sportsnet.ca.